Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
Today, we're going to be taking a look at Anno 1800. Right back there from well-renowned, would you say, designer Martin Wallace? Yes. This is based off of a series of video games, I believe. I'm not familiar with them. Maybe we'll talk about that when we get to the review. But before we get to that review, a couple of things. Number one is that if you want a really good idea on how the game plays beyond just a high-level overview, you could check out a live play that we did in our Summer Spectacular. We will link to that video in the description of this one. But for now, let's just take a quick overview from an incredibly well-spoken young man, and then we'll come back here and tell you what we think. Okay, here we see Anno 1800 set up. This is the main central board where you can see a whole number of industries, construction tokens that are representing these different industries. You also have some shipyards and some ships in the upper right there. You've got cards that you're going to be drawing as well throughout the game. This is an individual player board. Everyone's going to have access to one of those, and you have a number of workers that are available to you at setup and some ships that are ready to go. So generally speaking, in Anno 1800, the board game, what you're going to be doing is expanding your island. You can see that you already have some pre-printed industries on your board. You also have some spots here along the coast where you can build more shipyards, and down here in the water is where you can build your ships. The industries have to go in this area, the shipyards have to go here, and your ships would have to be in this water area. Makes sense. All right. These different workers represent, these different colored cubes represent different types of workers. The green are farmers, the workers are blue, the artisans are red. You don't start with the purple or the light blue. The purple are engineers and the light blue are investors. Generally speaking, these are higher tiered, more skilled workers that are a little bit more difficult to procure, and they give you access to more advanced technologies. All right. The other thing that you start off with are a starting hand of cards. You have 7 of these cards that are tied with the farmers and workers, and then you've got 2 of these cards which are tied to the upper 3 workers as well. On your turn, what you're going to do is you're going to take one action from a number of different actions. I believe there are somewhere in the range of 8 or 9 different actions, and every player is going to take turns taking one action at a time until the end game is triggered. And the end game is triggered whenever one player plays all of their cards. Now, it's not necessarily going to be these 9 cards that you start with. As a matter of fact, it's probably impossible that you'll only have these 9 cards. Throughout the game, you'll be adding more of these workers to your board, and every time you add a new worker from the supply to the board, you're going to take a card corresponding to that particular type of worker. So as you're gaining cards, you're gaining more point scoring opportunities, but you are also taking it a bit longer to get to the end of the game. So every player has one of these pretty substantial player aid sheets. This lists all the different industries, and this lists your different actions. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these actions. You've got expand, plan to activate population cards, swap population cards, increase your workforce, upgrade, open up the old world, explore the new world, take expedition cards, celebrate a festival, activate objective cards. Sounds like a lot, and it is, but generally speaking, the game flow is relatively straightforward. So what you're going to be doing is, probably to start off the game, you're looking at your cards. So let's take a look at some of these cards to give you an idea of what they look like and what they do. Along the top in this purple banner, you're going to see the resources that you need to be able to produce to be able to play the card as an action. So for example, in this case, you need soap and you need beer to be able to play this card, and that is an action. Play and activate population cards. So right now on my board, I don't have access to either soap or beer, so I would not clearly be able to play this card. How would I get access to soap or beer? I'd have to build them through these tiles. So let's look at soap first. Soap, this tile, says that you need to produce pork and coal to be able to get this tile. All right, so let's say that on my first turn I wanted to get access to this soap so that I can start working towards this card. What would I do? Well, I would look on my main board, and I have access to both pork and coal here. So what I could do is put one of my workers, or excuse me, my farmers, because these show the green symbol here. There's 2 spots, and my artisan here for the coal. Now I've produced both pork and coal. I can get access to this soap tile, and I could place it on my board. Now I could cover up one of these spots. I could put it down here. All right, I've got either of those options. So now that it's placed here, I can turn it on to the completed side, and now I've got access to soap, which, as you can see, requires a worker, a blue, to be able to activate it, so that later on, if I was able to get access to beer, I could, let's just say that I had done so, and I've got some beer here. Maybe I chose to cover up this string here, and I'd actually built it. Now, on another action, I could play workers to the beer and to the soap, which is right here, and I'd be able to play this card, okay? And this card's going to do a couple of things. It's going to give me 3 points at the end of the game, and I also have access to 4 gold. Now, I could choose to take this right away, or I could choose to take it at a later point. The bonus never has to be taken, and you can choose when to take it as well, all right? So that covers the first 2 actions, and those are probably the most frequent actions you're going to take, is expanding your island and playing and activating these population cards. Also, you can swap cards. So you would basically select 3 cards from any of your decks to the bottom of their respective decks and get new ones. So if you have cards that don't really fit the industries that you have available to you, that might be a good way to get rid of those. You can also increase your workforce. So as you saw, I started with a certain number of workers. You can add more. So for example, if I wanted access to another farmer, I would need to produce wood. I can get another farmer, but I have to take one of these farmer cards to do it. And so this is yet one more card now that I would have to fulfill to be able to trigger endgame. And as you go further up the line here, they get more and more expensive to be able to get those workers. All right. Next, I can upgrade. So in this case, you can upgrade population cubes up to 3 times from one to another. Think of it as training your workers. And there's a cost indicated between each of these spots that you have to be able to produce those resources. Now, what's different with this is that if you're going to train, for example, a farmer to become a worker, you're not adding a new worker. What you're doing is you're basically swapping them out. So you would put this back and get a worker now. And if that's the case, you don't have to get a new card because you're not adding to your workforce, you are just expanding it, you're upgrading it, all right? Another thing you can do is you can add new areas to build upon by exploring the old world. These big tiles here are old world tiles, and they're going to have some type of boon on them. This one actually comes with a level 1 shipyard. You would just place this off to the side, and now you've got a lot more room that you can use to build other industries, and you have access to another shipyard. All right, speaking of shipyards, you need to have shipyards to be able to build ships. And you can see that we have 3 ships that you start with. You have 2 trade ships and an exploration ship, and all these are going to allow you to do different things. For example, these will allow you to trade with a neighbor. If you've got a neighbor, or it doesn't have to be a neighbor, excuse me, anybody else in the game. If there's somebody else in the game that produces a particular resource that you don't have access to, if they have one of these industries that you don't have, you can trade with them. They cannot refuse the trade, but you have to be able to pay a certain number of trade tokens. So the cost is listed right up here. So if I wanted, let's say for example, somebody had one of these lovely coats that I needed access to, but I didn't have it. It's a red level good. So it shows here I need 2 trade tokens. I'd have to spend 2 of these trade tokens, and then I would be able to use another player's coat here. They would get a gold as a kind of a payment for that, okay? And that would come from the supply. You don't pay them that themselves. They get it from the supply, all right? And gold is a resource that is primarily used to bring workers back without kind of wasting a whole turn to do so. Because there is an action I'll talk about in a moment where you basically reset all of your workers and your ships as well. All right. You can also explore the New World, which are these smaller tiles, and these give you access to goods that are only available by going to the New World. They're not represented out here on the main board. So there are certain resources like these that you can only get access to by exploring the New World, and you have to use trade tokens to be able to have access to those. All right. The other thing you can do is you can take expedition cards. If you spend 2 of these tokens, these exploration tokens, you only start with 1, you can get 3 of these. All right. Now these are yet more cards that add to your, these do not add to your total here. These are just endgame scoring cards. So these are cubes of particular colors that you can place onto these at the end of the game to get endgame scoring. So it's a nice way to get some endgame scoring cards. All right, another thing that you can do is celebrate a festival, and that's what I was talking about before. That's where you basically take an entire turn to bring all of your workers back. All right, and then all of your ships get returned to harbor, and you have access to those once again. But again, you are taking a turn to do that. Okay, there are also cards along here. Now these are all endgame scoring cards, but we have one card here, Alonzo Graves, that has a particular action that you can take throughout the game, where basically you're spending a large number of you're spending 3 exploration tokens and 3 gold to get an extra turn, to be able to take an extra turn. So there are a number of different cards in the game. These are just the ones that are recommended for a first game or 2. All right, so you're going to be doing this in turn, taking one action at a time, trying to fulfill these cards that are all going to have different abilities, different bonuses, points at the end of the game. This gives you up to 3 upgrades of particular types of workers. This gives you a particular worker. In this case, you would get yourself an engineer if you wanted to take it. But again, if you used this bonus and got an engineer, you would have to take another one of these cards to replace it. These are optional. You don't have to take them. This gives you 3 trade tokens that you can use. All right. And as the workers are more expensive, or more skilled, I should say, they're a little bit more difficult to pull off, but they also are worth a lot more points, and they have better bonuses for you as well. All right, everyone goes along until somebody has played through all of their cards. Then you're going to play one more round to the end. Then you're going to count up influence points at the end of the game. You're going to get those through your population cards. You're going to be getting those through expedition cards. Every 3 gold will give you an influence point. If you were the first one to play out all your cards, you're going to get this fireworks bonus of 7 points. And then your fulfilled objective cards. Whoever has the most influence points at the end of the game is going to be the winner and the most fantastic explorer in Anno 1800. Let's head back over to the table and let's find out what we all think. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea on how Anno 1800 plays out. It is a Euro through and through. I think that's fair to say.
I think that's true.
Yes?
Yep.
Hides nothing. Yeah.
Correct. I may or may not have called it the Euro game, a number of times while we first played it. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, Euros are oftentimes not thought of as being spectacular in the components. Mm-hmm. Z, what are your thoughts on the components of this game?
I think the components individually are pretty good. Mm-hmm. I think that display isn't the most attractive or penetrable thing ever.
Yeah.
It's it can be intimidating when you set it all up, and setting it up is a bit of a beast. Mm-hmm. But once you look at this thing, it's like, hello, welcome to the grid. It's like, okay, I'm in. What is happening, and how do I get to, you'll look at something and go, oh, I need a fluffy dog and then 3, shopping carts. How do I make that? It's at the end of some complicated chain. The bits, I think, are well done. I like the artwork, which is sort of, kind of looks like that video game artwork, right. Sort of like the clip arty sort of look. But it works for me in this one. And I think the cardboard components and all of that stuff, I don't remember having a problem with anything standing out, you know?
Yeah.
I do remember a couple pieces of artwork that looked too similar. So from a distance, it was hard to see, like, do I need the factory or do I need the engine? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But overall, I agree, yeah.
And they're locked into the art assets from the video game, and I recognize that. I like many of them, and then there's a few that I think, oh, that's video game. You know what I mean?
It does look gamey.
And the one part that really confuses me, the objective cards, this is kind of a small nitpick, but the objective cards you're working towards are sideways on the back and tall-wise on the front, and I always flip them incorrectly. There's just weird choices that I thought, those are the few individual things I have an issue with, but the biggest issue is just kind of that, looking at that splayed out setup of the board and saying, okay, now what?
I think the cards are printed like that on the back to fit them on that board.
I think that's exactly right.
And that's the only reason why you do that.
Yeah.
Right. But I do wish it was clearer what's what stage. They had no room to space these things out.
Yeah.
It's like, this is starting type stuff. This comes from here, and these come from here. Or you have these, where you have to go to this step first, and then to the really advanced stuff. There's no visual indicator for that.
Right.
Or which resources are for the 3-point cards and which resources are for the 8-point cards. The fact that the 6 over tucked in the corner, they are grouped together, but there's nothing that says, hey, to get these, you need to explore a new world tile in order to get the
rubber tree or whatever the case may be.
Yes, right.
Yeah, no, and I agree, generally speaking, that the component quality is good, but I think part of the issue that I have with the overwhelming nature when you first look at it is that it is a bit of a table hog, right? I mean, there's components everywhere.
Right.
And while I guess that is somewhat necessary because it almost is like one big tech tree to some extent out there, it takes up a lot of space on the table. And I don't know that enough of that space is used to help the player kind of know, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
like a lot of times there'll be some UI help for the player. There's really not a whole lot there. There is a massive player aid that everyone got that I showed during the overview, which is, again, a bit overwhelming when you first see it. But the quality of the components I thought were good, but there was a little bit of incongruous art with the cards versus what are on the tiles. But
I think a color guide as to indicate level would have not been wasted.
Sure.
If around that little sewing machine there's a white outline on that, and then these have a pink one, and these have a red one, and these have a purple. It's like, these get more advanced, right?
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
That would have, something along those lines would have helped. And yes, it doesn't look as pretty, but you need to be helpful first every time, I think.
Yeah. Because I think that underneath all of this is a really good game. And once you've played it, multiple times, once you get into your 4th game, you have this idea, okay, I know what branches into what now.
Right.
But I certainly didn't my first go. I was still confused my 2nd, my 3rd game.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like you have to start with whatever you want to end with and work backwards in this game.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
definitely that aspect of
Just
it.
grab three cards. Oh, they share a thing? That's what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
3 of my cards need beer. I'm going to get beer.
Yeah.
And how do I get beer?
and
I
you're
work
right.
backwards. Oh, I need hops and I need whatever.
And to their credit, there being the publisher, they put in the back of the rule book, specifically, this game may seem overwhelming to you at first. Here are some things to think about, because I think that's necessary. I know the first time I saw it all splayed out, I was like, I don't even know where to begin here. So, so that being said, components, mixed bag, to some extent. What do you think about the actual meat of the game, the mechanics of the game? That's what Eurogamers are about, right? I mean, they want to know, is this going to be a solid, tight game? What are your thoughts on the mechanics?
I think it is. I think it is a solid game. I think it makes a bit of a lousy first impression, like you were saying, Chris.
It does, yeah.
I think that first salvo out of the gate looks really dry, looks boring, looks unfocused, looks like, hey, how about you cut out some stuff? But you play again after that, and the game speed picks up, and you start understanding what you should do and what makes you points, what doesn't. And you start understanding how to just sort of tailor everything given to fit what you are trying to do. And I'm speaking for myself, but I think you guys will agree, it continues to get better.
Yes.
It just sort of
Yeah.
keeps getting better, and you start to sort of get faster. That's true for a lot of games,
Right.
but this one, it was noticeable. Okay, a lot of games that first play, you can already see where it's going, and you can do that. But this game, you got to play it out.
Yeah.
You got to see it happen. I liked that. Is it dry? Yes, it's still a really dry game.
Absolutely.
But it is, but it is not there's not a lot of downtime up here.
It's not soulless. It's dry, but there is a heart
Yeah.
to this game. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, you're always sort of thinking about what's coming, what you need to be doing, what you ought to be thinking about.
The cards do a good job of giving you that information. You're always working towards something.
Sure. And I like the idea of there's a lot of different avenues that you can go strategy-wise in the game. You can go for that short game of, I just want to try to get my cards down. I don't care about building my population a lot. I just want to get the game over and see if I can kind of rush to the end. Or you can work on long-term. I'm going to build that tech tree all the way to the end. I'm going to try to get a lot of those 8-point cards out.
Right.
And so I like that there's a lot of just ideas of how you can go, ways that you can choose strategy-wise.
One of the things that I like about the game is that it is obviously marketed towards and built towards Eurogamers, right? Clearly.
Yeah.
I've mentioned that a few times. But what it does is it throws a lot of common Euro tropes on their head. And I think that's why it makes a bad first impression a lot of times. Because the whole idea of the game, the way you end the game is by playing out all of your cards, right?
Right.
But it does this thing where almost, not everything you do, but a lot of the things that you do are going to add more cards to your hand. And so it's this almost feeling of you're on a hamster wheel at first until you understand kind of how that card system works. You know, because I have a card that I play out and it gives me a boon. It gives me a bonus, right?
Yeah.
My Euro brain tells me I'm going to take that bonus every time and I'm going to take it right now.
Yes.
That's not necessarily the best thing to do in this game. I did not get that after the first play. And I was like, why? You know, how is this game ever going to end? You're just going to keep getting new workers and getting new cards. That's not always the right play. And it kind of throws some preconceived notions that I have as a Eurogamer. And I'm not only a Eurogamer, but when I'm playing a game like this, I'm in Eurogame mode. It really kind of belies some of those expectations, you know what I mean, and throws them on their head.
I think another one of those things that kind of gets thrown on its head is you can take your cards and you can switch them out. You switch out 3 cards per turn, and oftentimes in Euro games, that's a wasted action.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That's pointless, and it definitely, going through that deck in this game, I feel like can really help you.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't feel so wasted.
Recalling your workers.
Yeah.
Is another thing that is one of those things where you think to yourself, I don't want to do this. This
Yeah.
seems like a waste.
I got
Efficiency.
5 people. I'm going to take as many actions as I can. What did you build? I built 17 pigs. Why did you do it? I should have reset.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just follow a path to make, like we said, beer or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're not going to need it. It isn't part of the plan here.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't do it because you can. Be efficient along the way, and there are lots of things that up on the wall that you can walk up to and go, "Ooh, I like it. I'll take it." You don't need it. Don't be distracted by it.
Right.
I will say the game does tell you that. And again, we talked about how it talks, at the end of the game about what to expect it to feel like, and they do mention, we know it feels like it will never end.
Right.
It's an illusion in the game. It will end. You just it makes you feel that way. So I'm happy when a game is self-aware enough to warn the players about possible pitfalls in that first play or second play. I appreciate that. I wish more games would do that.
I agree.
You know? Like, the game will feel like it does this. We know. Don't try to fix it after you've played it twice. We played more than that.
Right.
Just try it again. You know, those sorts of insights. I don't mind. I don't need necessarily strategy tips, but things that a lot of people might notice and go, whoa, and they're clearly aware of. You should tell your players that, and I like that this game does do that.
Well, when I taught it to Wendy, because we played it on the live play, and then I brought it home, I think you'll like this game. There's 9 actions to it. But before you freak out that there are 9 actions, many of them are functionally the same. Put 2 cubes out to pay for a thing. Whether you build it on your board, or whether you pay for it out of your hand, or whether, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of things are pay for something, get something, or the 9 actions just disappear into a really nice flowing game.
There's a lot of logic behind it. There weren't times where I was just sitting going, I don't know what I can do. There's a lot of logic.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the theme, so to speak, it was evoked throughout this game? Now, I'm not familiar with the computer games much. I mean, I'm aware that they existed and that there's a whole bunch of different iterations of them out there. I think they're primarily PC games.
I think so, yeah.
Are any of you familiar with them? And whether you are or you are not, do you feel like this game had a theme? Did it feel like is it a Civilization-themed game? I mean, it's not a Civ game, but is it a Civilization-themed game? An exploration game? What are your thoughts?
So, on my first play, I thought, this is a grid. Expand your grid to put more grid things on grid. What I really liked, though, is realizing, we started analyzing, like, okay, pigs, right? That's on your initial board. What are pigs used for? 1 or 2 things. Potatoes are used for 1 or 2 things. Once you've built those 2 things, you can overbuild. I grab a new industry, I can put it over the farm. That's when I started to think, oh, this is not about expanding and getting every industry possible. It's about overbuilding some of the previous stuff. These technologies are no longer important. I can start building better ones on top of it. I can choose to expand still, but am I going to do it because I want to get more, beer and cognac and all these things I don't need, or am I expanding because my shipyards need to get bigger?
Right.
I'm starting to make more focused decisions, and then it kind of evoked a little bit more of that PC game, the PC city builder strategy game.
Right.
I feel a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
I think the replayability, what you're talking about there, and by that I mean really the efficiency, is deep. I think this is the kind of game you can explore across many plays and discover something each time you play.
Yeah.
How to become more efficient, what you can overbuild and should and shouldn't, how to cycle your cards at the opportune time, how many workers you should have. It's very granular, right?
Right.
You can earn all these cards that will give you a worker, and not only should you take it, but when you take it, if you do, there's a lot there that is layers upon layers. And there's a lot of actions, but they do flow well. So the game's got good flow, but you keep learning things as you are playing.
Right.
You keep sort of discovering what you should do and shouldn't do. I also like that when the game is done, there's some luck. Some of those cards where you have to have the cubes, the professions to match. But usually you can go back to a point in the game and pinpoint something you should have done differently.
Sure.
A pivot where you went this way and you shouldn't have. You chased down some technology 3 steps away for a card.
Right.
Didn't need light bulbs.
And you shouldn't have. Things like that. And I like that they are trackable. You can find it and
Very
go,
much.
I can make my game stronger.
Well, and you talk about exploring, like there's so much to explore and see in this game. The end game scoring cards that you have, I feel like that can change, like from the beginning of the game, that can change the dynamic of how quickly is this game going to end? What are we really shooting for? What are we all focusing on? Like strategies that'll work in one game won't work in another game because of those end game scoring cards, and you have to figure it all over again.
Yeah.
And I think that can be a positive for people that like that, and it can be a negative for people that are like, oh, I don't want to have to play something that feels like a whole new game.
Right. I guess what's nice about that is you can kind of tailor it to your group's experience too. It's like, okay, we don't particularly like this card that forces us down a particular path that this group doesn't work. So, of course, that takes a little bit of trying it out and realizing this card we didn't particularly like. I didn't like this strategy. It kind of pigeonholed us into. But you're right. I mean, that really adds to the variability of the game.
I think it's my favorite part of the game, I have to say.
Really?
The 4 cards or so that you flip over at the top.
Yeah.
And they are built-in actions that will change, or scoring opportunities that will change, because they do change it up.
Right.
You have to consider them as you would when you play Dominion, for example.
That's exactly
and you
what
get
I
all
would be
10
thinking.
cards, and you have to look and go, okay, there's a defense card but no attack cards. So I'm going to stop thinking about that, really, or vice versa. I like that because everything else is the same. Yeah, you drew a couple of different cards. But you look at those 4 things, whatever they are, scoring or actions, and they inform a lot of the other things you might choose to do or not do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Yeah, well, sounds like you already said what your favorite part of the game is. Let's just go into the whole thing. Let's go around the table, say what our final thoughts are, and what we would rate this game.
There's a lot of Euro games out there, okay? And there are a lot of them that are less dry than this, that are more attractive than this. This is well made, quality-wise. But it is calm. I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of a... It's not vibrant in its soul. But I enjoy the gameplay. It's not one I want to play all the time, but I enjoy what's there. I think mechanically, you can look at this game and go, Martin Wallace is a genius. The man knows what he's doing, right? But I don't love it. I like it, though. I like it way more than I thought I would after the first play.
Right.
I'm going to give it a 7.5, 7.5 from me. And I think there's a lot of folks out there that are looking at it going, ooh, and especially if you know the video game, and if you love Martin Wallace games, which I really don't necessarily, this is going to be something you'll really enjoy. But for me, 7.5.
For me, I'm going to go ahead and give this one an 8 because I really like it. We keep coming back to it and we're playing it, and it speaks more to my, Euro gamer soul, I think, than to yours.
Yeah.
But I do have issues with it, right? So even though I feel like this would be a very high-scoring game, there's definitely some things that kind of pull it back for me. And is it a game that I'm going to teach to people very often without them running away from it? But maybe after this review, maybe after hearing a lot of good things about it, it'll pick up more. But yeah, it lacks a lot in presentation and and those types of things. But I really enjoy that puzzle, the changing objectives you said. I love. We didn't even talk about the ships, the trading for resources. I didn't build something, but you did. So I don't have to build it anymore. I have to have enough, robust enough trade system. It's one of those games where there's almost always a way to do something.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that about it. So I'm giving this one an 8. It's very fun, and I look forward to. I know Martin Wallace is putting out some expansion content for it, and so that'll be in my ear. When's that going to come out?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and give this a 7.5 as well, just like Z. I really enjoy the engine building part of this. The crafting tech tree does have that very video game feel, and I enjoy that. I'm not in love with the way that the game ends. You can have a 45-minute game or you can have a 2.5-hour game, and that really bothers me, especially coming from this Euro standpoint of I want to know and I want to plan out what I'm doing for the game, and it can catch you by surprise how it ends, or it can kind of feel like, oh, okay, we're still going and I've completed everything, but now I have to get the rest of the cards out of my hand. And so I'm not in love with that aspect of it and the layout like we talked about. But overall, I did enjoy it and I had a lot of fun, so 7.5.
Yeah, that's a good call with the time frame, yeah.
Sure, it is. All right, Chris, you're the outlier here because I'm going with a 7.5 as well. Actually, now I will tell you, after the first play, I was sitting at a 6, and I think I said it at the table. After the first play, I was like, I got to tell you that there were a lot of things. This is going to sound really pretentious, and probably I'm using it incorrectly, like cognitive dissonance. At the end of the game, I felt like every expectation that I had going into it was wrecked, and that was bugging me. I was like, this isn't what I thought it was. Well, that's my fault. That's not the game's fault, right? And it's like you said, this design is very intentional. Clearly, and it is tight as a drum. It is tight as a drum. It feels remarkably balanced, but it's also wacky in the sense, like you said, it can have a very variable time length. So it's like some other Martin Wallace games I've played. In some senses, it feels like this kind of dry classic, but he throws in some weird things that are just like, who does this, right? And so I appreciate that. Like you, Chris, I am interested in expansion material, but I also don't know that I would look forward to teaching it to people that I didn't know what their gaming tastes were. Yeah. If they're people that I know their gaming tastes, then I'll know right away this is for them or not. And so that is, it's a little bit more of a niche game probably than most Euros, I would say. And
I also hope that this game finds its audience, because it has an audience out there.
Yeah.
But boy, with that cover and that title, if you're not aware it's based on a video game, Is this Eurogame the Eurogame?
Yeah.
Like you said, I worry that this is going to end up in the bargain bin
Yeah.
and be overlooked.
And it shouldn't
Well,
be.
also when you look at that cover is, it looks like a dry Eurogame, but also in an evocative way. Then you look at the back of the box, like, oh, grid.
Yeah.
It almost looks like it could be adventurous.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it pulls you lots of different directions before you realize what it is.
Right. Yeah, and make no mistake, when you see it on the table, it still looks like a dry Euro, but there's more going on, and I agree with you, Z. I hope more people get a chance to try it out. All right, well, that's it for Anno 1800. Until next time, I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
I'm Chris Yee.
And I'm Wendy Yee.
Have fun turning one cube into a different cube to get a tile that you place on your board. Have fun playing games.